Chapter 6 Murder on the Wrecked Steamboat. It must have been close to 1 o'clock when we got below the island. The raft seemed to go mighty slow. All I could think of was how close we'd come to getting discovered. When the first streak of day began to show, we tied up to a rock on the Illinois side and covered the raft with cottonwood branches. We didn't want to take any chances that someone might discover us. We hid on shore until dark, then we pulled out the raft and drifted down the wide river. We did this every day for 4 days, hiding by day and drifting by night. We passed towns along the banks and towns up the black hillsides. They looked like shiny beds of lights twinkling in the darkness. The fifth night adrift, we passed St. Louis. It was like the whole world lit up. I had heard about St. Louis, but I had never believed any place could be so big or so bright. Every night I would slip ashore at about 10 o'clock and buy 10 or 15 cents worth of meal or bacon or something to eat. Sometimes I helped myself to a chicken that wasn't roosting very comfortably. Mornings before daylight, I slipped into the cornfields and borrowed a watermelon or a muskmelon or a pumpkin or some new corn. Pap had always said it wasn't any harm to borrow things if you meant to return them someday. Around midnight on the fifth night below St. Louis, we had a big storm. There was a lot of thunder and lightning, and we stayed inside the tent on the top of the raft. By and by, I saw a steamboat that had crashed onto a rock. We were drifting straight towards it when the lightning flashed. I could see the boat clearly. It was leaning over, with part of the upper deck above water. Well, it being the middle of the night and stormy, I felt like any other boy would have. Excited. I wanted to get aboard the steamboat and slink around a little. Jim was dead set against it. I don't want to go fooling around with no wreck, he said, and he grumbled for a little while, but I managed to go convince him that it was the thing to do. The deck was easy to get onto, so we jumped right on board. We went sneaking along when suddenly we heard a voice cry out, "Oh, please don't, boys. I swear, I won't ever tell." Another voice said, "It's a lie, Bill Turner. You've acted this way before. You always want more than your share of the loot. And you always got it, too. But this time, you've said just one word too many. You're the meanest, most treacherous hound in this country." I turned around to Jim, but he was gone. He had run straight for the raft. I was too curious to leave now, so I dropped my hands and knees in the little passage and crept along in the dark, heading closer and closer to the voices. I came to an open door and peeked into the room. There on the floor I saw a man stretched out, tied hand and foot. Two men were standing over him, pointing a pistol at his head. The prisoner was begging for mercy, repeating over and over that he would never tell and pleading with the man called Packard. Finally, Packard explained to his partner that he didn't want to kill the man. He had a better plan, which he would discuss when they were alone. The two men went off into another room. I flattened myself against the wall as they passed by me in the darkness. Then I followed them to the other room. I put my ear to the wall and listened. "My idea is this," said Packard. "We'll rustle around and gather up whatever things we've overlooked in the stateroom. Then we'll shove for shore and hide the loot, and wait. It won't be more than 2 hours before this wreck breaks up and washes off down the river. See? He'll be drowned and won't have anyone to blame for it but himself. I think that's better than killing ourselves." Packard's partner agreed, and they started gathering the loot. I took off in a cold sweat and headed for the raft, but I stumbled over Jim, lying stretched out on the edge of the deck. "Quick, Jim, there isn't any time for fooling around and pretending to sleep. There's a gang of murderers on this wreck, and if we don't find their boat instead of drifting down the river, they'll get away. Quick, hurry, let's start looking. You start at the raft and—" "Oh, my Lord," whispered Jim, looking over the rail. "There isn't any raft. It broke loose and it's gone." I caught my breath and almost fainted. We were trapped on a wreck with two murderers? With our raft gone, we just had to find their boat and take it for ourselves, so we started our search. After a few minutes, Jim spotted the boat tied up to the stern of the wreck. It was piled high with loot the robbers had taken from the steamboat. I was pretty thankful that he was able to find it in the pitch dark. In half a second, I was in the boat, and Jim came tumbling after me. I cut the rope that held us to the wreck, and away we went. When we were 300 or 400 yards downstream, we saw Packard's lantern appear on deck, shining like a little spark. They must have discovered that the boat was gone and realized that they were in as much trouble as their prisoner. Jim manned the oars, and we began to hunt for our raft. For the first time, I began to worry about the men and how dreadful it was, even for murderers, to be in such a fix. So I said to Jim, "The first light we see, we'll land and find a good hiding place for you and the raft. Then I'll think of some kind of a story so I can get someone to go and rescue the gang. That way they can be hanged when their time comes." But that idea was a failure, because it soon began to storm again. The rain poured down so heavily that we couldn't see any lights at all. The wind pushed us along down the river while we watched for lights and looked for our raft. After a long while the rain let up, but the clouds stayed. The lightning showed us a black thing ahead. It was the raft. We made straight for it. When we pulled alongside the raft, we began unloading some of the loot from the boat and piling it in a great heap on our little raft. There were boots, blankets, and all sorts of clothing. Jim even found a box of cigars. We hadn't been this rich in our lives. After we had unloaded all the loot, I told Jim to float along down the river and shine a light when he figured he had gone about 2 miles. Then he was to keep the light burning until I came. Meanwhile, I would be manning the oars of the boat and heading towards shore. When I reached the bank, I tied up the boat and headed for the small village I saw twinkling in the darkness. The first person I met was a watchman. As soon as I saw him, I began crying. I made up a story about how the steamboat had crashed and how my family was stranded there. Since I was the only one who could swim, I told him they had sent me to save them. I promised the watchman that my family would reward him well for saving their lives. After I had finished my story, the old man got his boat ready for the rescue mission. I crept away in the darkness and waited in the boat on shore for Jim's signal, but I couldn't rest easy until I saw the watchman's boat heading for the wreck. I was feeling kinda proud of myself for taking so much trouble for that gang. Well, before long, I could see the wreck, dim and dusky, sliding along down into the river. A cold shiver went through me. There wasn't much chance now that anybody could survive. It seemed a long time before Jim's light showed up. When I finally saw it, I rowed towards it. By the time I got there, the sky was beginning to get a little gray in the east. We tied the boat to the raft and struck out for an island in the river. When we reached it, we hid the raft behind some bushes and sank the boat. When this was done, we turned in and slept like two dead people.